I used to think the worst kind of pain came from strangers. But no, the deepest wounds come from those you trust the most. I lived in that house for 13 years. I paid the rent. I bought the furniture. I carried every financial burden while my mother-in-law treated me like I was invisible, and my husband spent his time with another woman. And then, when they thought I had nothing left to give, they struck. They kicked me out, thought I'd break, thought I'd fall apart. But what they didn't know was I was no longer the woman they used to know. This is the story of how I left, taking everything that belonged to me and leaving behind exactly what they gave me: emptiness. Chapter 1, a dramatic opening. When I vanished from my own home, I left that apartment on a Tuesday morning. No arguments, no tears, not even a slammed door. I just disappeared. Funny, isn't it? For 13 years, I always thought if I ever left, it would be after a heated argument, a screaming match soaked in tears between David and me, or at the very least a desperate tug on my arm, from my mother-in-law Erica, the same woman who once loudly declared I was part of the family. But no. When I moved out, she just stood there, speechless, unable to say a single word. It wasn't until I called the movers and began dismantling everything, every item I had quietly bought with my overtime money, that Erica finally stammered. "What are you doing?" I calmly replied. "Moving out, just like you asked." She was stunned into silence. I guess Erica expected me to cry, to beg, or at the very least to resist. But I didn't. I chose to walk away in silence, and that silence unsettled her more than any outburst ever could. I left behind an empty house for them, not just stripped of furniture, but of comfort, of stability, and of the illusion of a family they thought they could control forever. What they never realized was I was the one holding everything together. And once I left, it all began to fall apart piece by piece. Chapter 2. When the numbers exposed the truth. That evening, after Erica had gone to bed early with the cup of warm tea I had made her, and David was once again working late, I sat alone in the living room and opened the file cabinet drawer. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a feeling. And then I saw my bank statements stacked beside a few rent payment receipts. I collapsed into the chair, my remaining bank balance $840, monthly rent $4,800. David, the man whose mother proudly called the backbone of the family, earned $2,100 last month. And that's including the tiny commission from a recent architecture project he finally completed after 5 months of delay. I stared at those numbers, and in that moment, I realized our marriage had never truly been a marriage. I had been living in a dream, a delusion of my own making, for the past 4 years, telling myself that working extra hours at the pharmacy was just for fun, that David was the breadwinner, and I was simply the sweet little sidekick. But numbers don't lie. I was the only one holding this household together. I paid the electricity, the water, the internet, the groceries, the diapers, even the sofa Erica lounged on every afternoon to watch her beloved dramas was bought with my overtime pay. And yet, all this time, his entire family had me convinced I was just a shadow. I remember it clearly. Just yesterday, during Erica's weekly bridge club gathering, she told her friends, "My son is such a fine man. He works so hard to provide us with a comfortable life." They sipped tea from the expensive porcelain set I had bought during last year's clearance sale. I stayed silent, smiling behind the kitchen counter, listening as each sweet little lie was poured out like honey. I used to think, let it go, just the harmless bragging of a proud mother. But no, it was more than that. It was a denial of my existence on the very ground I had shed blood and sweat to build. For the first time in 13 years, my hands trembled, but not from pain, from rage. I placed the stack of papers on the table, smoothing each one out carefully, almost like I was preparing a file for war. Because now I knew I wasn't invisible. I was the only real person in that family built on illusions. Chapter 3, 13 Years of Manipulation. I was never one of them. 13 years. If someone asked me, was it worth it, I honestly wouldn't know how to answer. I believed, truly believed, on the day I stood in that church wearing a simple wedding dress, holding David's hand, that love would be enough, that my sincerity would eventually reach the hearts of his family, even his mother, Erica. I still remember the moment David whispered in my ear during our first dance, "My family will be your family, and the fact that you can't have children will never be a problem." I cried when I heard those words. Cried because I trusted him. But Erica didn't cry. She just sat at the main table sipping champagne, watching me with an expression I'll never forget, a polite smile and a cold stare, like she was assessing a discounted item she'd been forced to buy. While chatting with guests at the wedding, she had no hesitation in repeatedly mentioning how deeply David had once loved his first wife, Sarah, and how Jessica, their daughter, was the last remnant of that great love. I heard every word, every calculated emphasis on the word replacement, and I understood she didn't accept me, and maybe she never planned to. Jessica, 10 years old at the time, barely even called me by name. David told me kids need time to adjust. Just be patient. And I was patient. Far too patient. I cooked for her, took her to school, wrapped birthday presents, hand-sewed sequins onto her princess costume for the spring recital in 5th grade. I did everything I could to become a second mom, but Jessica never truly saw me that way. I didn't fully understand why, until that one day, that afternoon at her elementary school. I had volunteered to help repair costumes backstage, hoping to bond with Jessica. As I knelt beneath the scaffolding, needle and thread in hand, I heard my mother-in-law's voice coming from the stage. Some women were never meant to be mothers, but still try to force themselves into families that don't belong to them. It's pitiful. I froze. My granddaughter lost her mother. She needs stability, not someone trying to replace her, not a stranger pretending to play a role that isn't hers. I don't know how many stitches I messed up after hearing that, but I remember clearly when I looked up, Erica was standing right there, staring me in the eye, smiling, as if she knew I had heard everything and had meant for me to hear it. That night when I confronted David, he simply sighed and said, "Mom's just trying to protect Jessica. You can't force her to love you." Then he turned away. Time passed and things only got worse. Jessica started calling me Dad's wife instead of using my name. At dinner, she'd ask her father to tell your wife something while I was sitting right there. I smiled. I endured. I told myself, it'll get better. But it didn't. With each passing year, I was pushed further away from the role of a wife, a mother, a member of the family. I was the one who quietly baked Jessica's birthday cake while Grandma took all the praise. I was the one who paid for the dishwasher, only to hear Erica say, "David is always so thoughtful." And that's when I began to see the truth. I wasn't part of the family. I was the help. I lived in the house I paid for, but wasn't allowed to choose the curtains. I cooked in my own kitchen, yet had every dish criticized. I raised a child, yet was never permitted to be called Mom. For 13 years, I exhausted myself chasing a place in this family. But the truth is, they never left a place for me to belong. Chapter 4. No one kicked me out of this family because I was never let in. I used to think that the final straw would be a cruel insult, a slap, or a screaming fight. But no, it was a navy blue dress hanging quietly in the closet. I had bought that dress after weeks of saving up from extra shifts at the pharmacy. I chose it because it looked polished, graceful, so that for the first time I could show up at Jessica's parent-teacher meeting looking like a real mother. I even printed out a list of questions, took notes about her strengths, her weak points, potential advanced classes, college prep. I had been nervously preparing all week. Then, at exactly 3 p.m. that day, as I stood in the hallway, purse in hand, hair neatly done, Erica stepped out from the kitchen. She wore her expensive coat and carried the leather handbag I had bought her during last year's clearance sale for her birthday. She looked at me frowning, as if staring at a stranger. "Where are you going?" she asked, completely serious. I replied quietly, to the parent-teacher meeting. You know, for Jessica. Erica pursed her lips, then let out a soft chuckle. Oh, that won't be necessary. David and I have always taken care of that. One more person will only make things messy. What teachers need most is consistency, not side characters who appear and disappear. I remember standing there, frozen, and she just walked straight out the door. From behind the curtain, I watched David open the car door for his mother, help her into the seat, and drive off, without even glancing back. That evening they came home, laughing proudly, saying Jessica had received praise from the teachers. I sat at the dinner table listening to David's recount, too afraid to ask a single question, because I already knew if I did, I'd only get the same cold look and the same tired excuse. Come on, she's just doing what's best for the family. What family, I don't remember when exactly I was written out of the picture. But gradually, I realized everything I did only made me more invisible. Erica never had to scream in my face that I wasn't welcome. She made it known by quietly taking over everything that should have been my role and doing it better to prove I wasn't needed. She cooked with Jessica, passing down her family recipes while I did the dishes. She hosted family gatherings while I stayed behind the scenes, prepping the food, cleaning up, only to be told the salad was too bland. She replied to the teachers' emails while I was referred to as Jessica's dad's wife at every school event. I lived like a tenant. Only difference was tenants at least get called by their real name. Chapter 5. When I thought hope was blooming, it turned out to be a trap. I still remember that morning clearly. It was just past 7 a.m., and I was standing by the counter brewing coffee when the landline started ringing. Erica rushed out and picked it up. Barely 5 seconds later, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in all 13 years. Jessica. What did you say? I hadn't even had time to process when Erica suddenly screamed in pure joy. Oh my God, you're pregnant. My granddaughter is having a baby. I froze. Erica practically floated across the living room, hand clutching her chest, breathless with excitement, repeating over and over my first grandchild. I'm finally going to be a real grandmother. Real, I looked up. That word sliced right through me like a blade, because for 13 years I had held Jessica during vaccine appointments. I stayed up with her to study for final exams. I bought her first box of pads. I cried in silence the first time she said I don't need another mom. And now I was standing in the very apartment I paid for, listening to that woman scream about finally becoming a grandmother. I gave a faint smile, and still, I walked over and gently said, "Congratulations. If you need help getting things ready, I'm happy to assist." Erica glanced at me. Her smile faltered just a little. Then she nodded. Yes, there's going to be so much to do. We need to prepare the nursery, pick out the crib, stroller, diapers, toys. Babies need so many things. The very next morning, our dining table was buried under stacks of parenting magazines, flyers, and printouts from luxury baby product websites. Erica had gotten up at 5 a.m. just to compile a list of critical items for my grandchild's development. And then, money began vanishing from our bank account like air leaking from a balloon. I gently suggested maybe Jessica and Gregory could choose some of the bigger items themselves. It is their baby after all. But Erica dismissed me with a wave. You wouldn't understand. The feeling of preparing for your first biological grandchild is something people like you will never get to experience. I swallowed hard. That one stung. But I said nothing. I thought, maybe if I just tried a little harder this time, I might finally make it in. I started clearing out Jessica's old room to turn it into the baby's nursery. I painted the walls a soft yellow, a gender-neutral color since they hadn't done the ultrasound yet. I read books on infant care. I even began knitting a tiny blanket from soft yarn. One evening, while I was knitting in front of the TV, David looked up and said softly, "That blanket. The baby's going to love it. Handmade things are always the most special." I smiled. Erica nodded too for the first time, without any criticism. And I wondered, Could this be the turning point? Could it be that, after all these years, I might finally become part of this family, not by forcing my way in, but through the quiet persistence of love? I truly believed that. But what I didn't know was that during this fragile, hopeful moment, they had already begun planning my removal, once and for all. Chapter 6. The Eliminate Her Plan and My Mother-in-Law's Cold Smile. I think I first sensed that something was off the day Jessica called, her voice trembling. Gregory lost his job, she said, choking back tears. The factory shut down. We can't pay next month's rent. The baby's coming soon, and we're about to be homeless. I froze in the kitchen, still holding the dish towel loosely in my hand. My heart, despite all the pain that girl had caused me, tightened. I couldn't imagine what it felt like to be a young mother on the verge of giving birth and not knowing where you'd sleep tomorrow night. Immediately, my mind jumped to solutions: rent them a small apartment, help cover the deposit, at least offer support for the first few months after the baby arrived. But before I could speak, Erica snatched the phone from my hand. "It's going to be all right, sweetheart," she cooed, voice dripping with honey. "Family will take care of everything. Grandma will figure it out." When she hung up, I noticed a shift in her expression. She sat quietly in the living room for a long time, her fingers laced together, face no longer showing the panic of a worried grandmother. "No." Her face was calculating. I gently asked, "What are you thinking?" Erica looked up and gave me a smile I'd never seen before, cold, slow, deliberate. "I'm thinking about what's best for my granddaughter and my great-grandchild," she said. "And sometimes, to protect your family, you have to make difficult decisions." I said nothing, but inside me a strange feeling crept in. A chill. 2 days later, as I walked into the kitchen like I did every morning, Erica was already seated eating breakfast with a serious face and her hands folded like she was about to start a board meeting. I hadn't even poured my coffee before she spoke. "We need to talk." No sarcasm, no passive aggression, no performance, just a verdict. "Since Jessica and Gregory need space to start their family, she said you should move out. Tomorrow." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "Move out," I whispered, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Are you saying I should leave my own house?" "Tomorrow." She nodded, perfectly calm. "You're an adult. You have a job. You'll manage. We need the space. And you no longer have a role here." Then she looked me straight in the eye, tilted her head ever so slightly, and added, "You've been playing the role of a mother, a wife, a family member for 13 years. That's long enough, don't you think?" I said nothing. I just sat down, heart pounding, vision blurring with rage and humiliation. I understood now. I had been officially exiled from their lives with a decision that had been in the works for a very, very long time. Chapter 7. When betrayal was no longer a suspicion, but a wound long bleeding. I couldn't sleep that night. The words, "you should move out tomorrow," kept replaying in my head like a haunting melody I couldn't shut off. I lay there in the room I once called mine, on the bed I bought with pharmacy over time, and felt like a stranger in my own life. I waited for the door to open, waited for David to come home, but the clock passed midnight, then 1 a.m., and still no one came. I called him. Voicemail. Second call. Voicemail. Third time my voice trembled. Still voicemail. I left a message, "David, I need to talk. It's serious. Please call me back." But no call came. Only the glow of my phone screen lighting up the empty wall in front of me, a reminder that I was waiting on someone who wasn't coming back. The next morning, I walked aimlessly through the city, my head spinning. I needed air. I needed to breathe before facing a truth I wasn't ready to touch. My feet carried me to Murphy's Tavern, a small Irish-style bar where David and I used to go on dates in the early years of our marriage. I hadn't planned to go in, but somehow I pushed the door open. The place was quiet. I sat alone and ordered a coffee. The waitress walked over a young woman with a hesitant smile. "You're Ms. Martinez, right? I'm Emma." I used to work at the pharmacy with you. I just transferred here." I smiled softly, a familiar face in the middle of chaos. But then Emma hesitated. Her eyes flickered nervously before she leaned in and spoke quietly. "Ma'am, I don't know if I should say this, but I think you deserve to know." My stomach twisted. "Your husband, he comes here often, not alone, with a woman, young, blonde. They usually sit at the back, 2 or 3 times a week." I don't know how long I held my breath after hearing that, but Emma didn't stop. I took a few pictures, not to snoop. It's just I remember how kind you were at the pharmacy, and I couldn't stay quiet." She held out her phone, and there he was, David, the man who once swore to protect me from the world with his arm around another woman, leaning into her like a man newly in love. The next photo showed them entering the Marriott Hotel. That name hit me like a punch to the chest, because just the night before, my mother-in-law had accidentally mentioned that exact hotel in passing. So they all knew. Everyone but me, Emma added. "I've been working here for about 8 months now. When I started, they were already regulars, so I guess it's been longer. 8 months? 8 months?" That was when David started becoming unusually busy, when he stopped holding me at night, stopped asking if I was tired after night shifts, started responding to me with blank nods and absent-minded shrugs. I used to call it the exhaustion of a man with responsibilities. How ridiculous. Turns out it was the exhaustion of a man living 2 lives, neither of which he built on his own. I stared at the photos, but instead of breaking down, I felt still. No more tears, no more pain, just a cold, quiet void. And inside it, something began to grow clarity. I turned to Emma. "Could you send those to me?" She nodded. "Of course. I really hope you get out of this." I left the tavern with my phone in hand, now filled with proof of betrayal. But more importantly, I walked out with a decision I made on my own for the first time in my life. If they wanted me out of this family, I would walk out myself. But I wouldn't leave empty-handed. I'd take everything they thought belonged to them and leave behind exactly what they gave me for the past 13 years. Nothing. Chapter 8. The Revenge Plan. I will leave, but they will have nothing left to stay for. When I stepped out of Murphy's Tavern, a light rain had started to fall. I didn't open an umbrella. I let the cold drops slide down my face like a ritual cleansing, washing away the illusions I had carried for 13 years. In my pocket were the photos Emma had just sent. David and Amanda, the name Erica, had casually dropped that morning like a final blow. She was young blonde, her arms wrapped around David like she'd been trained to replace me one piece at a time. But instead of feeling broken, my mind was astonishingly clear. If this was the game they had orchestrated, then I finally understood the rules. And more importantly, I realized I held the entire deck. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up doing what none of them ever imagined I would do, gathering evidence. I went through every receipt, every bank statement, every credit card transaction. I pulled up the email confirming the leather sofa order, the one Erica always claimed was David's birthday gift to her. I printed the receipt for the dishwasher, the 65-inch TV, the new refrigerator, the $800 baby crib, everything, all in my name, all paid from my accounts. I compiled them into a thick file, labeled every item, dated every purchase, as if preparing for a courtroom battle, and then I made the call. Premier Moving Services. I need to move the entire contents of a 3-bedroom apartment tomorrow morning. The dispatcher sounded startled. "You want to move a full residence? Tomorrow?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Everything except 1 bedroom and some baby items. I want it all out." When I hung up, I looked around the apartment one last time. This wasn't my home anymore, but everything inside it was mine. And if they thought I'd just walk out quietly, they were still clinging to the old version of me. Tomorrow morning, they would meet someone new. someone they unknowingly created with every insult, every betrayal, every ounce of ingratitude they poured on me for over a decade. I was about to leave, but I wouldn't leave behind anything that wasn't theirs to keep. Chapter 9, I moved out and took the truth. They tried to bury 8 Sozarjoyam. Right on time, 3 men in Premier Moving Services uniforms stood at the front door of the apartment I had lived in for 13 years. I was wearing my navy blue suit, the one I had once prepared to wear to Jessica's parent-teacher meeting, but was denied the chance. Today, I would wear it to reclaim ownership of my life. Erica was still sitting at the dining table, nibbling on the toast I had made the last habit I ever offered her. She looked up at me, then at the movers, rolling in dolly after dolly, confused. What's going on? I turned to her, my voice even calm, almost frighteningly so. I'm moving out, just like you asked. Erica shot to her feet, moving. Everything I handed the lead mover a thick folder, a list of everything that belongs to me. Receipts, transaction IDs, payment dates, everything is labeled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream, but every word landed heavier than any yell I'd ever wanted to throw. She stood frozen as they began dismantling the leather sofa, the one she sat on every day, while judging my cooking. The dining table where we shared silent dinners and where she once told me I couldn't cook to save a life was disassembled chair by chair. The giant flat-screen TV, her pride and joy to brag about at Bridge Club, claiming David bought it for me, was carefully bubble-wrapped and wheeled out. Erica stammered, You can't just take everything like this. How are we supposed to live? I smiled faintly. Maybe the way you lived before I came. Or, you'll learn how to live once I'm gone. She began pacing, pointing at the fridge, the coffee maker, the microwave. What about this? And this? Who's going to cook? Who's going to buy us new things? What are you leaving behind? I stepped closer, looked her in the eye. You said I didn't belong in this family. Well, then I'm sorry your possessions don't belong to me either. I turned away, leaving her standing there in a gutted kitchen she once ruled like a queen, treating me like a servant. The living room was bare now. My bedroom packed neatly into labeled boxes, the bathroom shelves empty, not even the cheap perfume she mocked me for remained. I left behind only what they'd need to begin their life. Without me, an old blanket, a broken chair leg, and a few packs of newborn diapers, the only item I hadn't fully paid off yet. 10 a.m., David walked in. He opened the door to a hollow apartment. I was standing beside the movers as they labeled the final box. What the hell is going on? He yelled. I didn't answer. I just held up a piece of paper. This is the lease agreement. It's in my name. Monthly rent, $4,800. Guess who's been paying it for 13 years? David fell silent. Jessica and Gregory appeared behind him, jaws dropping at the sight of the now empty home. But where are we supposed to live? Jessica murmured. The baby's almost here. I shrugged. I used to think I was an outsider. Now I'm simply doing what all of you have always insisted I do, playing my part. I headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, David. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo album, held up the screen to show him. A photo of him and Amanda at the Marriott Hotel arms wrapped tightly around each other, clear as day. Courtesy of Emma, from Murphy's. Very thoughtful. Don't you think Jessica's eyes widened in horror? Dad? You cheated, Erica staggered, grabbing the edge of a chair to steady herself. I smiled one last time. You should call a lawyer. I already did. And just like that, I walked out. No tears, no second glances. I walked out like a cold wind through a house that only now was truly empty. Chapter 10. They lost everything. And I found myself again. I moved into a small apartment near the financial district. Not spacious, not luxurious, but it was mine. No one fighting over the TV remote. No voices criticizing every meal I made. No one asking, "Are you really wearing that dress?" as I got ready for work. Just me, and silence. A few weeks after I left, David's lawyer reached out first. Apparently, The photo at the Marriott made it clear he wasn't in a position to negotiate. The divorce was swift. He agreed to pay post-divorce financial support not out of generosity, but because I had enough evidence to turn it into a costly scandal. Jessica and Gregory couldn't keep up with rent. They had to move into a cramped studio apartment, just enough space for a crib. No 65-inch TV, no smart fridge, no leather sofa, and of course, no one picking up the bills behind the scenes. Amanda, the youthful mistress, vanished the moment she realized David wasn't as wealthy as she assumed. She never signed any marriage papers. Smarter than I was back then. And Erica, well, she's no longer the one giving orders. The woman who once sat cross-legged in the chair I bought, barking orders at me in the kitchen I paid for, is now considering moving into a nursing home because no one wants to take her in anymore. The family she tried to preserve by pushing me out has crumbled piece by piece. And me, I'm back working full-time at the pharmacy. The pay isn't high, but I feel useful, respected. At night, I study personal finance. Started a blog to share my story not under my real name, but just enough for women like me to find something they could relate to. Sometimes I still think about those silent years of sacrifice, but I don't regret them. Because from those ruins, I built a new life with my own hands, without needing anyone's approval. They once called me the extra. Today I call myself the survivor, and more than that, the winner. I used to be afraid of being alone. I used to believe that if I walked away, I'd lose everything. But then I realized I never lost a thing. I had simply escaped a gilded cage where I was expected to bow my head and stay silent. Today I live in a small space, but it's mine. I work. I smile. I choose peace over fake acceptance. And them, they lost the woman who quietly kept the whole family from falling apart. And now, they finally understand the cost of underestimating someone is never cheap. Sometimes revenge doesn't come in screams. It comes in walking away and never looking back.